I twist the dial on this battered radio until the static settles into a mournful hum, and I speak into the mic. This is Wavebreaker Station, broadcasting from what used to be the Atlantic coastline. If you can still hear me, you're somewhere. Out there, clinging on, the sky above me has the color of rusted copper, glowing faintly as though the sun itself has bled into the clouds. It hasn't been blue in years. The once gentle breeze is now a scorching gale, carrying with it the acrid taste of salt evaporated into nothingness. Where there was ocean, there is ash-white, crystalline dunes that stretch to the horizon, flashed by heat mirages that dance like ghosts of the world we lost. I stand on what remains of the old promenade, its marble balustrades fractured and blackened. The boardwalk planks lie splintered, half buried in mineral dust. Farther out, shipping cranes jut skyward like the skeletons of giant sea creatures rusting in the acid breeze. They creak in the wind, a hollow clatter that echoes through empty streets. Every landmark is unrecognizable now. Skyscrapers collapsed into heaps of twisted steel. Highway overpasses sagging like tired limbs, and suburban neighborhoods. Swallowed by sand, the air tastes of decay and memory. Beneath the surface of every ruined building, there are stories trapped in charred wallpaper and corroded filing cabinets, photographs faded beyond recognition, children's toys melted in two, glass books whose pages crumble at the lightest touch. Nature has turned hostile, geothermals rising so fierce that any exposed skin blistered in seconds, rain that falls as steam, and storms of ash so dense you can't see your own hand in front of your face. I remember when the tides still rose and fell, when gulls wheeled overhead. Now there's only the hush of death and the distant roar of collapsing earth. The ocean boiled off faster than any scientist predicted, and where once teemed life, there is dust. The reef structures lie bleached and broken. The ships that sank during the Great Boil lie baked into the seabed, their hulls fragile as eggshells. The remnants of humanity are scattered like tokens in a forgotten game. Small camps huddle under improvised tents stitched together from tarps and faded flags. Survivors fire up scrap metal stoves to distill what little water they can scrounge, filling jerry cans with half saline brine. Some have formed ragtag caravans, clattering across the dunes on jury-rigged vehicles born of bus chassis and tractor engines. Others prefer isolation, barricading themselves in underground cellars, trading off the risk of surface heat for the terror of suffocation. No central government answers these broadcasts anymore. The World Council fell 2 years ago, fractured by resource wars and mistrust. Now, a dozen warlords claim dominion over pockets of land fiefdoms, bound by gunfire and fear. Radio frequencies are plastered with threats. Stay out of the sand sea, or you die. Send your children. We'll teach them respect. I keep my location vague. I survive by letting hope drift like a whisper in the static. I've watched rivers evaporate into nothing. The Mississippi's Great Basin has cracked open like a loaf of stale bread, its bed a maze of fissures that glow with geothermal heat. The Colorado is gone entirely, long since a myth to the young ones, born in the aftermath. The Great Lakes receded until each was a ring of muddy ponds. We map them now by their ghost outlines on satellite fragments. Yet life persists in stubborn corners. Tenacious weeds sprout blue-green shoots around industrial spill sites, adapting to chemical runoff. Rats scurry in the shadows of collapsed warehouses, their fur matted, but their eyes bright with the will to live. At dawn, odd birds still crow in the skeleton trees, skeletal branches clawing at a sky that tastes of fire. Every horizon holds a question. Is that a column of heat, twisted smoke, or the glow of yet another oil refinery gone rogue? Are those lights flickering on the horizon the promise of survivors, or the lure of a trap? When I broadcast, I report what I see so that if anyone else is out there, they might make sense of what remains. Below my feet, the warmed earth hums with the lingering energy of a world that once was. I can almost hear the distant heartbeat of the planet, faint but unbroken, reminding me that even in this collapsed state, something endures. The shorelines may have vanished, the oceans may have boiled away, and civilization may be a memory, but as long as I breathe and this radio crackles, there is a trace of hope. Stay tuned, I whisper. I'm still here, and so is this world, even if you can't recognize it yet. I'm broadcasting from what used to be the Gulf Coast, if you can still call it that. The air tastes of ash and salt, though the ocean vanished years ago. The sky is no longer a vast dome of blue. Now it hangs low and copper red, as if the sun bled into every cloud. Temperatures surge past anything we once thought survivable. A relentless furnace that curls mirages on the horizon, where once stretched marshes and white sand beaches. There lies cracked clay and granulated salt flats. Water, that miraculous elixir, is now myth. The last reservoirs evaporated in the great heat wave of 22, and the rivers followed suit. Bedrock turns to dust. Every step kicks up motes that cling to my lungs, sanding them until each breath is a struggle. I look west toward the city ruins. Skyscrapers, once gleaming cathedrals of glass stand riddled with holes, their skeletons peeking through tattered facades. Streets are buried beneath dunes of inorganic sand, a hybrid of concrete grit and desert ash. In the distance, highway overpasses snap like twigs under the weight of shifting earth. Traffic lights dangle uselessly, blinking red into an empty night. Every landmark I knew is warped beyond recognition. The old stadium where fans roared now sits half-sunken, its seats choked with dust. The Civic Center's dome collapsed in on itself, a crater of twisted steel. Even the riverbanks bear only the faintest scarza dried, pitted valley where water once gleamed. We map it now by ghost contours on scavenged GPS units. In towns beyond, entire neighborhoods are unrecognizable. Roofs have caved under the weight of wind-blown sand. Autoclaved car shells of melted plastic and warped metal lie abandoned on dried asphalt. Mottled, chemical-burned foliage cracks underfoot. Hardy weeds thrive in runoff from derelict factories, bearing mutated blooms that glow under moonless nights. What remains of humanity is fractured. There is no central government to speak of Vonley whispers of a coastal alliance that holds sway over scattered enclaves, and rumors of militarized convoys that trade water for blood. Factions sprout like weeds, the scavengers who roam, the dunes picking through wreckage, the regulators who demand tithes of food, the keepers who hoard seeds and salvage what might grow. Every camp is its own fortress, with barbed wire and watchtowers, jury-rigged from telephone poles. Some survivors burrow underground. They call their enclaves vaults, though they're more like tombs. Subterranean bunkers lit by flickering LEDs, corridors echoing with the clank of machinery. They claim safety from the sun's wrath, but every generator sputters on borrowed time, every filter choked with dust. They pay outsiders in grains and medicine, yet rumors say the vaults take more than they give. Outside those walls, the landscape is lawless. Raider patrols gain the heat haze, their rusted pickups mounted with jury-rigged flamethrowers and spike strips. Their banners flutter on makeshift poles, ripped flags repurposed as warning signs. Travelers vanish at dusk, swallowed by the night that brings freezing cold. It swings between extremes. By day, you fry. By night, you freeze. I've seen caravans' armored buses dragging solar panels and water tanks across the wasteland. They supply small settlements with power and purified water, but they move in convoy only under guard. Every mile is a gamble, ambush or mechanical failure, sandstorm or acid rain. The storms have grown feral. Cloudbursts of sulfur that blaze the skin and bleach metal in minutes. Even the air is betrayed by violence. Dust devils whip up toxic clouds, spiraling through ruined streets. Once familiar scents jasmine, pine, citrus are replaced by the stench of rot and fuel. My radio picks up static, laced with distant screams, of machinery failing, of people arguing over scraps, of the earth itself groaning. Yet, scattered amid the waste, small flames of life flicker. An irrigation well still hums somewhere east of here, its solar panels half buried but functioning. A handful of survivors cling to an aquifer, digging shallow wells and planting genetically engineered crops that can endure heat. I've heard their signal weak, but real. They're forming a settlement, calling it Haven Point. Every night, I wait for word. If their broadcasts reach me, I'll direct any who can hear to their coordinates. It might be a trap, or the oasis we so desperately crave. Either way, I'll keep broadcasting, sharing what I see. Because silence is worse than this static. So I turn the dial again for whoever's still listening. If you're out there, know this. The world has burned, drowned, and cracked itself open. Cities have fallen silent. Governments have crumbled. And every day is a battle against heat, hunger, and despair. But as long as this signal carries on the wind, so does our story. The oceans may have vanished, the shorelines erased, and the landmarks lost, but our voices endure in the void. And that, for now, is enough. I'm Miles Harrington, if you still use names like that. My voice crackles through this radio because it's the only way I've found to reach someone, anyone beyond my lonely outpost. I used to be an engineer. I used to commute on a crowded train, coffee in hand, headphones on, imagining the day when I'd buy a house. Now I pedal a bicycle generator at sunrise, scrape together data from scavenged sensors, and broadcast over dead airwaves, hoping my words drift like driftwood across the charred seas of dust. My home is a rusted shipping container, half buried in the dunes, patched with tarps and insulation scavenged from a ruined factory's ventilation shafts. Inside, there's no furniture, just a cot made from plywood and canvas, salvaged transformer, and a solar panel perched on a collapsed rooftop somewhere beyond the dunes. Every dawn, I wrench myself upright before the sun crests the horizon. The heat wave is merciless by midday. If I don't finish my work before then, I risk dehydrating in my own sweat. I ration water to 2 liters per day, distilled from groundwater through a jury-rigged reverse osmosis filter. Some days, I haul jerry cans to an ancient well 50 miles to the north, a hair-raising journey past radar checkpoints and acid rain clouds. Other days, I stay behind, tinkering with my transmitter, coaxing a stronger signal out of corroded coils and solder joints that crackle under strain. I broadcast for 2 reasons: to map what's left and to remind us that we're still here. I collect snippets of weather data, temperature spikes, sandstorm trajectories, pockets of radioactivity, and share them so anyone else on the move has a chance. But more than science, I report stories. I read messages from survivors, cast in static, but heavy with longing. Wavebreaker Station, this is Laya at Haven Point. We've got 20 recruits, need seeds and medicine. Or, Miles, if you hear this, turn north. There's an underground spring east of the old dairy farms. Each transmission feels like sending out a lifeline, a promise that someone else cares. I survive by trading knowledge. A pair of hunters gifted me a ramshackle wind turbine last month in exchange for a week's worth of radiation readings around the old power plant. Twice. Every piece of equipment is borrowed, bartered, or stitched together from ruin. I keep a journal of serial, numbers and modification notes in case I meet another tinkerer, so they know I can be trusted not to steal, but to share. What drives me is guilt, responsibility, and a stubborn thread of hope. I lost my wife, Alina, in the first summer they called the Inferno. We were out camping by a reservoir that boiled off in days. She slipped into a sandstorm and vanished. I spent weeks scouring the dunes, broadcasting her name, calling into the static until my throat bled. Nothing returned but echoes. Her empty, sleeping bag lies draped over a nail in the container walla, silent reminder of how quickly everything can turn to dust. I don't talk about her much on the air. It would break something inside me that I need to keep intact. Yet every report I read, every new settlement I direct to safety, feels like a tribute. If I can help just one person hold on, then her memory still carries weight. And if I could choose, I would have given anything to hear her voice over these waves again. My losses are many. Friends who starved on forced marches to a so-called safe zone. A dog I rescued only to have it succumb to chemical toxins. When I drift to sleep, I see their faces in the firelights bright with desperation, lips cracked from thirst. I wake in a cold sweat, convinced I'm back in that makeshift tent we once shared, beside me, and then I remember. Still, I carry hope like a flint in my pocket. I believe in rebuilding, in the spark that ignites when someone else hears my voice and answers back. Each roger that, Miles, or copy your report is a flicker of connection. Even a single syllabler, crackling, Miles slipped, into another station's broadcast, pulls me back from the brink of giving up. I document small victories. Last week, I rigged a moisture harvesting system using an old air conditioning coil. It pulls a few cups of condensation each night, enough to supplement my supply. I announced it on the air, and hours later, a voice whispered from the static, "Can you send schematics?" Suddenly, I wasn't alone, tinkering in silence. I spent the afternoon drawing diagrams in charcoal on scrap metal, planning to ferry them out to a group of engineers holed up near a defunct oil refinery. My emotional armor is cracked, but I patch it with purpose. I keep my broadcasts concise, just enough humanity to remind listeners why we fight the day's heat. I read poems I wrote in the early days, half insane with grief. How to purify diesel for a generator. When I'm feeling braver, I open with a greeting like, "Good morning, survivors," as if we were all gathered in a smoky hall, listening to old wartime radio. I have allies in the dark Laya at Havenport, who tends a greenhouse powered by geothermal pockets. Omar and Jin, two hydro engineers trading water harvesting tech for solar panels, and Carla, a former teacher who runs clandestine schools in underground tunnels. We exchange data over short-range frequencies, forging a network of knowledge and empathy. Name for voices that refuse to be silenced. Nightfall brings another set of challenges. Temperatures plummet below freezing, and the dunes hiss as the heat bleeds away. I light a small propane lamp and wrap myself in a patched blanket, tuning my receiver for emergency pings. Every click in the static sets my heart racing. Might it be friendly traffic or the distant rumble of raiders? Twice I've mounted my bike to investigate a lone signal, only to find abandoned radios snapped open by scavengers. Now I'll wait for daylight, more cautious, but still driven by the need to connect. My mind drifts to memories. Alina laughing under a canopy of pines. Our dog bounding through the underbrush. I can almost smell pine needles again. I cling to such recollections because they keep me human. If I stop remembering who I was, I might forget who I can still be. So I keep talking. I keep broadcasting warnings of acid rain rolling in, map the last clumps of vegetation, offer instructions on wind turbine repair. I speak into the void, hoping my words land in another ear, break through the loneliness, and kindle another soul's flame. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that survival isn't about steel-reinforced bunkers or armored convoys. It's about voices that refuse to die, voices that remind each other why we resist the dark. Every day I pedal this generator, pour my life into these broadcasts. Of our survival continues. The temperature gauge read 57 degrees Celsius before it fried itself. I watched the little digital numbers sputter and die, and in that moment I knew we'd crossed another line in the heat's slow siege. I reset the transmitter and leaned closer to the mic. Wavebreaker Station, this is Miles Harrington. If you're within range, you'll see it too. The horizon shimmers with fire, and the sky roils with dust-charged pyrocells. For the past 6 months, the world's climate has slipped into an irreversible cascade. We used to call them heat waves. Now we call them firestorms. Winds whip shattered fields of dry grass into swirling columns of flame that leap across roads in seconds. Thermometers explode before they can register the real heat. Satellites track the growth of these pyrocells like storm chasers, but on the ground there's nowhere to hide. In July of last year, the southern scorch, a dome of stagnant, superheated air, parked itself over the Gulf Coast, trapping heat and pollutants in a rolling furnace that burned soil and sand alike. Every dawn, the world lit itself on fire. vegetation desiccated. The forests of the southeast became tinderboxes, igniting in rajah smoke plumes that turned the sky black. I'd set out to collect solar panels, abandoned at an old research facility 20 kilometers south. The trek should have taken half a day. Instead, it nearly killed me. At midday, I ran into a convoy of 4 half-track vehicles, emblazoned with the flag of the regulators. Their leader, a woman with a metal plate grafted to her skull, demanded my water and spliced fuel for her generators. When I hesitated, her gun barked. I handed over 2 liters, my last ration, and backed away into the heat haze. Later that evening, stumbling toward camp, I stumbled across Laya's scouts from Haven. They carried water jugs on their shoulders, moving with the careful pace of those who know each cup could mean survival. They shared ration scrums of freeze-dried vegetables and a single sodium-packed tablet, each to keep brain cells firing. In the heat's haze, their eyes were sun-cooked but bright. They told me of new raids on their supply caravans, how raiders had learned to track their scent of chlorinated water for miles. Every day, the air deteriorates. Dust storms, once seasonal, now whip up daily in rolling black waves. Within minutes, visibility drops to 0. Lungs fill with silica shards that scar the alveoli. We wear makeshift mask scraps, a filter material from Lab Vincent, hope for the best. Night brings little relief. Temperatures plummet to near freezing once the sun sinks, causing metal to contract and snap like brittle bone. Electronics die of condensation. Water lines freeze, then burst, flooding precious bunkers with slush. During the worst storm last month, I counted 5 microbursts within an hour downdrafts of superheated air that strike the earth and ricochet outwards. They slammed the container-turned-radio shack, bent its walls, and ripped the solar panel array from its mount. I spent 3 days crawling through the wreckage, soldering wires into new junctions, scavenging heavy panels from a half-electric tram car. Every resource is stretched to the breaking point. The great heat wave vaporized rivers. Wells run low. Aquifers are exhausted faster than we can purify them. Reverse's filters require electricity and membranes that crack under UV exposure. I've learned to harvest dew with improvised condensation chambers, black plastic coils, chilled with ice blocks when I can find them, but that yields mere milliliters per night. Crops fail under heat stress. Genetically engineered strains grow in underground hydroponic tubes, but they require power and nutrient solutions that we barter for at desperate rates. I traded my hydraulic piston from a broken pump for 50 salad leaves this spring. Diesel is a luxury. We burn biodiesel processed from algae patches in brackish pools. If you can find a pool that hasn't gone toxic, the process yields enough to run a generator for a few hours, but only if you're willing to risk chemical burns and inhaling noxious vapors, antibiotics, painkillers, anti-inflammatory gels. They're all rationed. Scrapes and infections can kill faster than heat exhaustion. I keep a first aid kit patched together from raid spoils, but I always wonder how long the last pill will last. For those with scientific gear, the data tell a grim story. High-pressure ridges park over trapping heat and prohibiting cooling fronts. These blocks last months now, not days. As permafrost melts, methane venting accelerates greenhouse warming. Wildfires add carbon to the atmosphere faster than regrowth can absorb it. Sea surface temperatures have risen above 35 degrees Celsius in equatorial regions, spurring unprecedented evaporation. The resulting atmospheric moisture fuels more violent storms, but those storms also deposit more salt and toxins on land, contaminating any remaining aquifers. I broke down these mechanics in a broadcast 2 weeks ago, hoping to empower scavenger communities with knowledge. I charted the ridges on a salvaged laptop, then transmitted screenshots via slow-scan TV. Within hours, a group 150 kilometers inland managed to rig a homemade fog harvesting mesh, pulling liters from the humid night air. It worked just a trickle, but enough to seed hope. My network grows and fractures in equal measure. Leah's Heaven Point offers refuge to those who can trek 40 kilometers north. Omar and Jin keep a mobile water purification lab on wheels, but raiders ambushed them last month, diverted them into a ravine, and seized their entire stock. They escaped by night, wounded and waterless, and limped back with half their number. They broadcast a distress call, I answered, guiding them to an abandoned aqueduct where they siphoned flow from a collapsed spillway. And then there are the scavengers, opportunists who strip equipment from anyone down on their luck. I once met them halfway through a salvage run. They offered to spare my life in exchange for my transmitter coils. I refused. They shot my bike's tires, and I crawled back home, steering on bent rims. Since then, I've come to expect crooked smiles behind gas mask lenses, rifles trained on my spine whenever I venture out alone. There is no pause in this crisis. Every broadcast window, just 2 hours at Donnie's, a race against dehydration and heat stroke. I monitor temperature projections. A new wave is forming over the Rockies, expected to descend on the Great Plains in 3 days, smashing records by Y-5 degrees Celsius. The Plains communities still clinging to subterranean farms beneath. The old Corn Belt are scrambling to reinforce cooling systems, but their batteries can't handle continuous cooling once they fail. Humidity and mold will kill more than the heat itself. So here I sit, soldering a thermocouple sensor back together, ready to relay precise heat index readings to every camp that listens. I'll pack extra distilled water into insulated cases and send coordinates to the convoy leaders. I'll describe how to jury-rig evaporative coolers using old church pews and wet burlap, because cutting through the panic with usable information might save lives tonight. This is not a drill, I say into the mic, voice ragged. This is the new normal. Brace for impact. And I broadcast on because every warning, every data, point, every shared tactic threads us together against the storm. Because the crisis isn't simply the disaster itself, but the despair that follows. And if I can keep people fighting the day's heat and each other's cruelty, then maybe, just maybe, we'll survive to see a cooler dawn. The air on my last supply run tasted of metal and ash, and I knew before I saw the gauges that the water tank was bone dry. My bike's rear rack felt impossibly heavy as I pushed it up the dune, one pedal stroke at a time, sweat stinging my eyes. I let the radio hang from my shoulder and muttered into the mic, Wavebreaker station to any station water critical. Coordinates 056932 east. Back at camp, Leah greeted me with a half-smile. She held a single half-empty canteen in one hand, her fingers tracing the meniscus of sloshing brine. "We shouldn't have sent you," she said, voice low. Her eyes, shadowed by exhaustion, glinted in the lantern light. "We're down to 3 days' supply, at most 3 days." It felt like the last embers of hope flickering in a dying hearth. We divided the canteen, blurry sips that burned our throats alive, each gulp a reminder of how far we'd fallen. Food stocks were no better. The hydroponic chambers at Haven Point have been running on emergency power since the regulators ambushed our fuel convoy. The nutrient solution is fading. Our lettuce beds wilt under dim LED strips that flicker like dying fireflies. We ration 2 morsels of protein paste per person per day, each sachet a cardboard-tasting promise of strength. Fuel for the generator lasts only an hour at night. That's when the storms ragicid, rain hammering the corrugated roof, thunder so loud it shakes the water jugs off the shelves. We huddle in the back room, breathing through cloth masks, praying the batteries don't drain first a week ago. I spotted the raider convoy on the horizon, a dozen trucks painted matte black, mounted with charred steel plates and flamethrower turrets. They moved like vultures, scouring the sand for any sign of life. Leah activated the repeater, and we cut the power. Our lights died. The camp went black. We listened to engines idling, curses in gravelly voices, laughter harsh as desert wind. They prowled our perimeter, kicking over jerry cans, looting our supplies. Carla's medical pack vanished in minutes bandages, antiseptics, even the final vial of painkillers. When Sherman, our makeshift guard, confronted them, they pointed a flamethrower at his face. He backed down. They left at dawn, leaving scorched earth and broken spirits. I found Sherman the next night, lying on the sand, cradling a small tin of sugar, the only thing they'd overlooked. He offered me a shake of his head. They took everything. In the aftermath, as we patched roofs and refilled jerry cans with muddy condensate, Leah shared what she'd heard on the wind, a signal, faint and garbled, emanating from the northeast quadrant far beyond the limits of our maps. The voice belonged to a group calling themselves the Blue Oasis. They claimed to have discovered an ancient underground reservoir fed by a subterranean river, pure and cold, flowing beneath the ruins of a collapsed dam. I confessed I was skeptical. I've heard a dozen rumors of Haven Point itself, of a desert fortress powered by geothermal vents, of solar farms girded by autonomous drones. All turned out to be desert ghosts, traps set by raiders, or mirages conjured by dehydration. Still, something about Blue Oasis felt different. They used pulse code bursts in their signal, an encrypted handshake that matched one-eyed Taut. Omar and Jin, only engineers would know it. The camp divided itself into 2 halves, the hopeful and the pragmatic. Carla argued we were fools to chase echoes. Every mile we ride in that direction costs a liter of water and a day's ration of paste, she said. If there's no oasis, we come back empty-handed. Likely not at all, Leah countered. That running out here was no different from staying. Better to risk one journey than die waiting. Her gaze found mine as I crouched by the generator, twisting wires. You keep the maps, Miles. We'll move on your word. My own heart pounded as doubt and longing wrestled inside me. If Blue Oasis existed, it could be the salvation of hundreds an aquifer deep enough to fill cisterns, channels to irrigate our fields, a chance to rebuild. But if it was a raider trap, a cruel joke, we'd lead every hopeful soul into a slaughterhouse. We set a departure date 3 nights hence, at the first full moon. Omar and Jin argued over equipment. Should we bring the remaining solar panels for negotiations, or strip them for extra fuel? Carla pressed for backup medicine and food. Leah refused to weigh us down. I watched from my container as the wind howled outside, rattling the patched windows. I tuned the receiver, half expecting to pick up another station arguing the point on our frequency. Silence answered me, thick. As the dust outside that night, the storm's leading edge hit our solar array, bending panels like soda can aluminum. Sparks flew, the generator misfired. The hydroponic lights went dark. The water pumps seized. Seeds, we thought, germinating, withered in their trays. I scrambled out with wiring pliers and duct tape, jury-rigging leads under the thrashing rain. Carla and Sherman held the tent flaps, faces pale. When the storm passed, the desert was quiet, but our losses were clear. A week's worth of plant growth. Next morning, I broadcast our plight into the void. Wave breaker station power and water offline. If there's any station within range, please respond. Then at dusk, a raspy voice came through. Wave breaker, this is Blue Oasis. We read you. Supplies limited. Request your ETA and encryption key. My blood ran cold. They had my Keitha one I'd only shared with trusted engineers. Blue Oasis wasn't raider propaganda. They were real. In the hush that followed, I shut off the mic and looked at Leia. Her face was unreadable in the lantern glow. Our netcad, or they're the best trap anyone could set. Carla's voice broke in from the doorway. If they're real, we go. If they're not, she didn't finish. On my shoulder, Miles, you've given us hope before with your maps. It cost you half your supplies. You got us solar cells in return. I trust your call. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Been a thread tying this ragged band together. We had a plan. 6 of us would ride lightly, carrying only 2 canteens each, a week's worth of paste, Carla's medkit, and Omar's water purifier. We'd tow a cart stocked with Leah's solar panels for trade and 1 extra panel for ourselves. Sherman insisted on carrying his rifle. I strapped my toolkit to my back, tools clinking as I tested the straps. The rest of the camp saw us off at dawn, faces half hidden by scarves. Trust no one until you see the water. Their voices shook in the thin air. We nodded, mounted our bikes, and pedaled into the rising sun. I felt the weight of every choice pressing into my shoulders. Doubt whispered that I was leading friends to slaughter, but Hopa, rarer commodity, pushed back. Maybe Blue Oasis held what they promised, a lifeline beneath the earth, a chance to recover, to grow again. Every mile ahead was uncharted, every pedal stroke a gamble. Yet my resolve hardened with each turn of the wheel. I would carry our story forward through sand, through storms, through blood and firin', till we either found salvation or became another ghost in the desert. I clicked the mic to life one last time. Wavebreaker station to Blue Oasis, ETAO for 30 hours. Session key Delta 6 Echo. We ride with hope and caution. Guide us to your coordinates. Then I shut off the transmitter, heart pounding loud enough to drown the whine of the wind. The dunes stretched before us, infinite and merciless, but so did the promise of waterland with it, perhaps, the fragile spark of survival. I crossed the final dune in near silence, the first pale light of dawn tinting the horizon lavender. My lungs burn with every breath, grit scraping against throat and teeth, but the cart rattles on behind me, loaded with Laya's solar panels and Omar's purifier. 6 of Uslaya, Carla, Sherman, Omar, Jin, and me press forward toward the coordinates blue oasis gave us. The air seems to hold its breath, as if the world itself is waiting. When we crest the ridge, the valley below should be empty desert, but instead I see stone, massive blocks of masonry, half buried, their faces carved with water-worn grooves. The ruins of the old dam appear, a crescent of cracked concrete spanning a dry riverbed. And beyond it there, shimmering in the trough pools of water, pale turquoise and impossibly still, I drop to my knees on the sand, disbelief hammering my chest. This can't be real, by God, whispers Omar, voice thick with awe. Laya's hand clasps mine, her eyes glisten. We left the dunes behind and found a buried vein of life, but euphoria cracks in an instant. From the north rim of the valley, a thunder of engines erupts. Raider trucks black and scorched pour over the crest, weapons trained on our makeshift cart. Their flags snap like gunfire, and I taste copper in my mouth. Leah shouts, "Take cover." Sherman returns fire with his rifle. Omar and Jin wrestle the solar panels flat behind a broken pillar. Carla crouches by the purifier, hooking hoses to the nearest inlet. I stand at the edge of the pool, heart pounding. This water is ours for the taking, but if we're overrun, it will belong to no one. A raider henchman charges our flank, blade raised. I lunge forward, striking his wrist with the butt of my toolkit. He staggers, and I shove him backward. The purifier's pump whirs to life. Water spills into jerry cans. Feet dot in that moment. I have a choice. Stay to help fill every canteen, or pull Laya and the others to safety. Every second I linger risks their lives and mine. Omar's laughter when we first rigged the moisture harvester. I realize survival isn't solitary. If I die here chasing water, all our sacrifices are meaningless. Fall back, I roar. We drag hoses and cans, leaving half the water behind. Sheridan covers our retreat, rifle blazing until the last jerry can clicks into Leah's pack. We run for the ridge, bullets kicking sand in our ankles. Jin collapses halfway up. I grab her arm and haul her to her feet. The raiders pour over the dam like hounds, but we make the crest and disappear into the haze, safe on the far ridge. We gasp for breath, bodies trembling. Every canteen is full, 24 liters in all enough to mean life or death for every soul at Haven Point. Laya presses her forehead to mine. You chose all of us, she says simply. Shame and relief surge together, but the water beneath the dam still glistens and tapped and taunted, promising salvation if we dare return. Omar wipes sweat-streaked grime from his goggles. They'll be back, he warns. We need a plan. As dawn breaks fully, painting the valley gold, I stare back at that ruined dam. We have the water, but can we secure it? Can we build defenses around that hidden reservoir before the raiders return? In the silence that follows, I feel the weight of what I've done, led my people into danger, then rescued them with precious water that could change everything. The guilt threatens to drag me under, but I steady myself. I find that spark again. We hold the dam, I say, voice firm. We build defenses, rig traps, set alarms. We'll turn this place into our stronghold. Laya nods, and the others fall silent, absorbing the magnitude of our new purpose. The crisis has peaked hand. The real battle for our survival begins. I tap the mic on my chest. Wavebreaker stationed to Haven Point. I broadcast, voice steady, despite the adrenaline crackling in my veins. We've secured a water source. Coordinates incoming. Prepare. Defenses. Hope is real for now. As the signal crackles out across the silent dunes, I close my eyes and whisper to the desert winds, we are not done yet. And in the rising sun's glare, I vow we will not be broken here. Not today. The horizon burned orange as we crested. The ridge that first morning after the raid orange, not from fire this time, but from the thin haze of dawn, filtering through lingering dust. Carla nursing her own burns from a captured incendiary grenade. Jin moved slower, favoring a twisted ankle. Yet when we reached the hidden basin, its turquoise water lay undisturbed, gleaming like a forgotten jewel. We returned to Haven Point, not as refugees, but as bearers of life. 24 liters of water could scarcely seem like enough to change the world, but for a settlement on the brink, it was a miracle. Laya organized bucket brigades, lines of survivors passing cans from hand to hand under a searing sun, filling every cistern and barrel in sight. Even the hydroponic beds, brown and brittle before, soaked up the moisture and began to perk. Within 24 hours, seedlings that had curled into desiccated husks showed fresh green tips. Sherman cleaned his rifle in the shade while Lee and Omar inspected the newly rigged water pump scavenged motors repurposed to draw from deep beneath the dam's cracked foundation. Carla treated minor injuries with antiseptic she'd hidden from the raiders. Jin hobbled to the edge of the reservoir and cupped her hands, letting the cold clarity flow over her palms. "It's real," she whispered. Her awe was ours, too. In the evenings, we gathered around a makeshift fire pit carved into the dam's ruined walkway. The water's gentle lap became our lullaby. For the first time since the scorch began, laughter threaded through the camp. Sherman's bad jokes, Carla's dry commentary on our salvaged medicine supplies, Omar and Jin debating whether to build a floating raft for deeper exploration. Yet even as we celebrated, I watched the shadows in their eyes. We all knew this oasis would draw attention. Word would spread through clandestine radio channels or wandering traders until every raider, warlord between here and the old city, would lead convoys to this hidden valley. Our defenses were rudimentary: sandbag barricades, tripwire alarms, scattering of improvised caltrops, and a handful of rifles. It was a start, but not nearly enough. When I broadcast the news, Haven Point secured a water source, my voice sounded different, steadier. I realized I was no longer the lone tinkerer besieged by guilt for Elena's death. I was now part of something larger, a community with shared purpose. That shift didn't erase the Pastelona's empty cot still loomed in my container butt. It reframed it. Her memory had become a catalyst, driving me to build rather than to mourn in isolation. I thought back to the moment at the dam when I chose to fall back rather than fill every last canteen. I'd clung to hope and connection, even as bullets chipped the concrete at our feet. That choice sacrifice for the many had cemented who I'd become, not just a survivor, but a protector. Outside our barricades, nature showed tentative signs of responding to this new water. Along the fringe of the reservoir, tufts of hardy, grassy sixtremophile species Omar had identified sent pale shoots toward the sun. In the shallow shallows, green algae bloomed, turning the water milky emerald by midday. Dragonfly nymphs, survivors of the aquifer, skittered beneath the surface, but recovery is fragile. High heat still sizzled the air. Storm fronts gathered, daily threatening acid rain once more. Every irrigated field required constant maintenance, pumps, filters, and solar panels that demanded clean surfaces. Dust settled on the modules within hours of cleaning. Each harvest promised nourishment, but pests and pathogens, adaptable to the broken ecosystem, lurched in at the first sign of vulnerability. In the weeks that followed, we fortified the dam, lead teams to erect solar-powered floodlights. Around the perimeter, Omar and Jin rigged motion-sensitive alarms from repurposed microphones and spare transistors. Carla trained volunteers in field triage treating not only physical wounds, but panic attacks and heat-induced psychosis. Sherman organized patrols at dawn and dusk, moving silently along the ridge. Despite our best efforts, the world beyond the valley grew harsher. Reports trickled in of caravans attacked farther east, of entire settlements forced to abandon underground farms when their generators failed. Dust devils delivered pockets of superheated air into villages, collapsing roofs and melting equipment. We rallied to send Helplia, dispatched a water convoy to a sister outpost 70 kilometers north, but every rescue cost us precious reserves. Still, in the dam's shadow, a rough equilibrium took hold. We discovered that by rotating watering schedules, we could sustain crops without depleting the reservoir. By covering fields with shade cloth and burying irrigation lines, we reduced evaporation losses. The hydroponic chambers hummed under solar arrays that now thrived on the valley's microclimate, which was marginally cooler and more humid than the dunes above. Community rituals emerged. A morning watch when someone played a wind-blown wood flute, a midday silence to honor those lost, an evening broadcast from Wavebreaker Station reading, survivor messages and scientific tidbits, like explaining how the aquifer's thermal gradient kept the water at a constant 12 degrees Celsius year-round. I spend my nights on the dam's walkway, staring into the pool's mirror surface. I think about Elena's laughter ringing through the pines, and I realize it echoes here too, in the wind, through the reeds. I am no longer haunted by her absence, but buoyed by the promise that memory can become legacy. Yet I also recognize the thin line we walk. One broken generator, one harsh storm, one new band of raiders could tip the balance back into collapse. I feel a knot in my chest when I hear the distant rumble of engine siege patrol might be friend or foe. Havant Point is no paradise. We still ration water, still scavenge fuel, still fight for every seedling. But now there is purpose in the struggle. Children born here learn that water can return, that earth can turn green, that hope can be engineered as surely as a circuit can be soldered. We talk of expansion, building an aqueduct to channel overflow water to nearby settlements, mapping other underground springs, replicating our filtration systems for caravans. On the move, every project carries risk, but also potential redemption for a world that teetered on the brink. The dust clears enough to see the ruins' edges. The dam stands as a monument to human ingenuity and resilience. Its cracked concrete held together by makeshift braces and communal will. The valley floor, once silent and barren, now hums with the pulse of survival. I press my palm to the water's surface. A cool tremor runs through me. We did this, not the world's salvation, but a start. And as long as this oasis endures, I know that even in a world boiled and blasted by climate's wrath, we can still craft places of shelter, nodes of resistance, and sparks of hope in the fading dusk. I whisper into the breeze. We are here, we endure, and the world, however broken, still calls us to rebuild. Section 10, Conclusion. Hope or despair, 1,000 words prompt. Conclude the script with a bittersweet or reflective ending. Hope is fragile, perhaps a new discovery, an unexpected survival tactic, or a small victory keeps the story from ending in complete despair. Prepare for the future. The protagonist must face the fact that survival continues. No finality, just an ongoing struggle for life. Final message. What is the protagonist's final message? Is it a plea for others to keep fighting? A reminder of the value of hope, no matter how small. Example, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but for today, I have enough to keep going. Enough to fight for just one more sunrise. Stay alive, stay human. The world might be gone, but we're still here. And as long as we're breathing, we've got a chance. ChatGPT said, the fires of the day have cooled into a bruise-purple dusk, and from the dam's fractured walkway, I watch the first stars pierce the copper-red sky. The water below ripples in the lantern glow, each wave a quiet promise of life. We filled every cistern at Havenport. The hydroponic chambers hummed through the night. For a moment, I believed we'd turned the tide. But hope is fragile. In the morning, the storm front will roll back in a wall of sulfurous clouds, carrying acid rain that hammers our solar panels and pocks the reservoirs surface with corrosive droplets. The raiders we scarred at the dam will return, smarter and angrier, seeking retribution and theft. Our newborn crops will wilt under heat stress before they can mature. Our fuel reserves will dwindle, and every drop we siphon from this hidden vein chips away at tomorrow's promise. Yet I cannot let despair take root in our hearts. I walked the length of the dam at first light, testing the makeshift floodlights Laia and the others installed. Each sensor glowed bright, wired into a tangle of alarms. Omar and Jin cobbled from old microphones and wire coils. Carla patrolled the perimeter, bandaging a recruit who sliced a leg on broken rebar. Another reminder that survival isn't bloodless. Sherman slept, curled beside his rifle, face lined with fatigue. But even he managed to grin when he saw me. We celebrated our small victory in practical fashion by reinforcing defenses, stocking extra fuel, and rationing water with even stricter discipline. We haggled over blueprint sketches for an aqueduct, argued over whether to send another convoy to the north, and debated how best to inoculate seedlings against fungal outbreaks. Every plan acknowledged a simple fact. The struggle continues. I found myself standing by the water's edge, cupping a handful of the cold, clear liquid. It felt impossible in my Palmen artifact from a lost world, distilled by geology rather than engineering. I wondered how many centuries it had lain in darkness, waiting for someone to uncover it. I thought of Elina, and I imagined her voice, carried on this water's path, whispering across the broken land. For a moment, I felt connected to a chain of life that spanned epochs. My voice trembled only once when I said together, because I realized that salvation here depends on more than steel braces and filters. It depends on us choosing community over isolation, cooperation over suspicion, and persistence over surrender. This is our small victory. The dam stands, water runs, crops sprout, and people still dream. But the road ahead is long. Each dawn will bring new storms, literal and metaphoric land. We'll face them as we have so far, with grit, ingenuity, and each other. So here is my final message for whoever can hear these words beyond the dunes. We are not gods, and we did not tame the earth. We only borrowed a fragment of its mercy. Our victory is provisional, our oasis precarious, and our future unwritten. Do not let the weight of this world's collapse crush your spirit. Celebrate the small flames of life, a single seedling, a shared ration of water, the laughter of children born under broken skies, and fan them into a beacon. Survival is not a prize you claim once and keep forever. It is a habit you practice, daily, waking up, breathing, reaching out, and carrying on. It is the decision to whisper hope into the static even when the echo is faint. It is the choice to protect one another, to build defenses, to learn, to adapt. It is the understanding that every drop of water, every watt of power, every heartbeat is both a triumph over collapse and a debt owed to tomorrow. I don't know what tomorrow holds. The world may yet boil, crack, or flood again. The dam may crumble, the raiders may swarm, the storms may grow even fiercer. But today we have water. Today we have community. Today we remember that life endures in the smallest gestures. A makeshift alarm sensor, a shared poem, a mother teaching her child to name the stars beyond the heat. Stay alive, stay curious, stay human. Build your strongholds not of brick and sandbags alone, but of empathy and purpose. And when the next crisis comes, it will meet it with the same defiant breath you take now. This is Miles Harrington, signing off from Wavebreaker Station. May our voices carry each other through the darkness, one broadcast at a time.